Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Empowering Green Future, Healing for Careers in Sustainability, organized by Alliance for Energy Efficient Economy in celebration of World Youth Skills Day. I am Alicia Abraham, Senior Research Associate at AEEE, and I am honored to be the moderator for this important discussion. The United Nations General Assembly declared 15 July as the World Youth Skills Day to emphasize the importance of equipping young people with skills for employment, decent work, and entrepreneurship. Today's webinar is focused specifically on green skills. We are all aware that the impact of climate change is intensifying and extreme weather events are becoming more frequent. This has led to an increased focus on climate action. Our Prime Minister announced a net zero by 2070 target for India at COP26 in 2021. According to Climate Policy Initiative, India will need cumulative investments over $10 trillion to achieve this target by 2070. This enormous growing annual investment is in the green sector is creating and will create more and more green jobs. So what are these green jobs? ILO, International Labour Organization, classify green jobs as decent jobs that contribute to preserving or restoring the environment. These jobs can be in traditional sectors such as manufacturing or construction, or even as well as in emerging green sectors like renewable energy and energy. However, with this massive incoming demand for green jobs, there are very few who are skilled enough to harvest these opportunities. Thus, the need for green skilling, or we could say getting skilled for green jobs. Green investment, apart from its direct impact on climate change, can also impact the broader economy, including employment. For example, according to some researchers, energy efficiency investments create more jobs per dollar invested than traditional energy supply investments. They generate direct jobs in the sector where investment happens, indirect jobs in related supply and service chains, and induced jobs due to rising total wages. Also, the improved energy efficiency in long term also lead to saved energy costs, which can lead to an increased spending, thereby more induced jobs. So this kind of a multiplier effect throughout the economy is crucial for emerging economies like ours. Let us also look at why green jobs and thereby green skilling is important for India. If you look at the past few years of economic PLFS data, we can see that unemployment rate in India continues to fall. But the share of self-employment amongst total employment is rising. What does this mean? The share of low-quality jobs are increasing. We can also see that a large chunk of urban youth in India between the age of 15 to 29 are jobless due to poor skills and lack of quality jobs. This is where green skills are very important. Green skills or green jobs often provide good quality employment and pay higher wages than non-green jobs in India. The demand for green jobs is expected to grow by 15 to 20% annually over the next decade. Thus, we need systematic green skilling to tap into this growing demand for green jobs. During today's webinar, we aim to address the changing employment landscape with the emergence of new green jobs, or even incorporating green elements into traditional jobs. We also wish to discuss skills and skilling opportunities in three key sectors: sustainable transportation, sustainable building sector, and sustainable cooling. We have with us a distinguished panel of experts who will share their insights on various aspects of green jobs and the skills that are required for these jobs. Our agenda will be as follows. Each panelist will be answering a few curated questions about their respective sector. In the meantime, we would like to request the audience to use the Q&A option to send your doubts or questions to us. Our panelists will dive into our presentation. I would like to inform that we have with us today Dr. Arkopal Goswami, Chairperson at the Ranbir and Chitra Gupta School of Infrastructure Design and Management, IIT Kharagpur. We also have with us Mr. Prasad Vaidya, Director of Solar and Decathlon India and Senior Advisor at AEEE. Joining us is also Mr. Ajit Panikar, Founder and CEO of Pure Blue Technologies Private Limited and immediate past President of the Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Trades Association Limited, RATA. Thank you, panelists, all for joining us today and sharing your expertise with us. So let us kick off our session with Dr. Arkopal Goswami, who will be talking about driving India's youth towards sustainable transportation. Dr. Arkopal, I'd like to ask you a few questions first. Initially, could you please tell us about the kind of jobs that are being created in the field of sustainable transportation and how can our young professionals prepare for these opportunities?
Okay, thank you, Alicia. Am I audible to everybody?
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay. So good afternoon to all the audience and to my fellow panelists. Thank you very much, first of all, to AEEE for organizing this very interesting and timely webinar. So as Alicia mentioned, I'm Arkopal. I am currently at IIT Kharagpur. I specialize in sustainable transport, so I'm going to give you some insights into what is happening in the field. By the way, I'm an academician right now. However, I was in the industry prior to being a faculty member at IIT Kharagpur. So I have a little bit of experience of both the industry and now on the research side. So what I have noticed over the past 20 years or so, ever since I started my career in sustainable transport, that jobs are slowly transitioning from your core typical civil engineering, transport planning kind of areas to a more interdisciplinary area of sustainable transport. So what I mean by this interdisciplinary area is that transportation, it affects all of us on a daily basis, right? We all either, take a bus to work, we take either metro rail to work or even our own cars. So while we do this, what we are observing is that if we take our own cars, that is emitting a lot of pollutants and causing a lot of congestion on the roads. So, these are unsustainable ways of moving around in our cities. So if we do this day in and day out, you may see that many of our cities are highly congested and polluted as well. So the transport sector heavily contributes to all of this. So how the green jobs are now being created, or what are these green jobs, is that we are kind of moving away from, say, for example, designing our roads only for vehicles. Okay, so design of pavements has been an age-old job area for civil engineers, for example. But now we are moving away from just designing our urban roads for vehicles, whereas we are looking at a holistic picture. We are saying that, hey, not everybody on our streets use vehicles. So let us design the roads for bicyclists as well, for pedestrians as well, for buses as well, and also for the motorized two-wheelers or four-wheelers. So, if you see some of these smart city schemes that have been around over the past 5 to 6 or even a decade, you will see that some of these cities are actually experimenting with taking away lanes from motorized two-wheelers or cars and giving it to bicyclists or public transportation or even to pedestrians. So these types of jobs will gain a lot of traction over the next decades or so. So you have to know how to design bicycle lanes, for example. You have to know how to design specialized pedestrian facilities, right? How do pedestrians cross at a junction? So you should know not only should the signal be for vehicles, but it should also be for pedestrians. So this is one set of example. The other set of example on the motorized side is people are now moving away from, the mechanical engineers are moving away from designing, IC engine vehicles. We know that hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles are now, the new age or the new era of vehicular movement. So if you are a traditional mechanical engineer, you have to now, transition yourself to understanding how an electric vehicle works. Also, you will see that we had traditionally the large cities had taxis, and now you have what are these called Olas and Ubers and Rapidos. So how do you design these systems? System design. So another aspect of greener jobs is to understand data, understand how these urban origins and destinations work. So how do you work with big data? So that is another area where a lot of green transport jobs are going to go into. Another aspect is integrating transport with land use. That is a big area where we always say that if you don't have proper land use and transport integration, you will never have, your jobs closer to your homes. So by land use, I mean, if your home is in a different part of the city and your job is in a different part of the city and it's not well integrated with, say, public transport, then you will maybe, pollute a lot or drive a lot alone in your car. So integrating land use and transportation is going to be a key challenge that will lead to much more greener cities, that would lead to much more greener transport scenarios. So that is another area where things will move to. And finally, if I would have to say, another area of green transport or green sustainable transport would be to look at safety. When we say sustainability, we almost sometimes tend to forget the safety aspect. As long as we are safe, we can be sustainable in the future. A lot of people lose their lives on the roads nowadays. Accidents are becoming more and more frequent, and they are becoming more and more severe as well. So they are not just minor accidents, you are actually getting killed if you're in an accident. So a lot of green engineering, so as to say, how to lower the speeds of the vehicles on the road through proper design, through proper engineering. That is another aspect where, a lot of sustainable transport jobs are going to go. So I'm going to take a pause here. And if you have any questions, let me know and I'll hand it back over to Alicia.
We would also like to ask a follow-up question about like how young professional can best prepare for these opportunities, as well as there are a lot of jobs in traditional transport sectors that are getting eliminated in the near future. So for students who are getting trained in traditional transport sectors, what additional skills would benefit them in securing jobs in sustainable transport areas? So that is the follow-up question.
Okay, and that is a good question, how to either develop these new skills or to upskill yourself, right? If you are already a professional in a traditional civil engineering field or in a traditional urban planning field, urban transport planning field, then how do you upskill yourself? Or if you are a new graduate, then how do you acquire these skills? First, if I start with acquiring these skills, then I would say that when you are getting into when you're looking at a curriculum of a program that you want to get into, say, for example, you want to, get into engineering, planning, you want to get into even law. So look at the curriculum and see if it is to what level it allows you to be interdisciplinary in nature, right? What you see many of the institute of eminence or national institutes around the country are doing is they are reducing your burden of core courses. They are saying that you should have X amount of courses that are core to you, but at the same time, do not limit yourself to taking courses only within your stream. Build up your curriculum in such a manner that you need to go for example, in this case, if you need to get into sustainable transport, I would say you need to have prepare yourself, have some economics courses. You need to have some urban planning, you need to have some traffic engineering courses, you need to have some safety engineering courses. So when you are applying for a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, look at the curriculum, see how much flexibility you have in that curriculum, and then choose, a proper institute to join so that you get this flavor of, different types of courses that you can take, and you can tailor your career in that manner. Now, unfortunately, and as technology changes, it always happens that some jobs do get obsolete. But that is now, that is not a point of, being very tense or anything. You always have to upskill yourself. Say, for example, civil engineering always had, this course on surveying, right? The course on surveying may completely be converted into a drone-based survey, right? We used to, otherwise most of the students use, theodolites and all of the physical instruments to do surveying, large-scale surveying of areas through which a road has to go through, for example. So this may completely get converted into a drone-based survey. So look in a curriculum if you're getting into a civil engineering curriculum, for example, see if you are exposed to laboratories where they allow you to learn how to fly a drone, how to take images from a drone, how to take data from a drone, and then how to do analysis of that data. So that is one example of a traditional job that may get if you are in such kind of a job, you may need to upskill yourself. Similarly, design, like I said, design of highways, design of roads, very traditional kind of a job. But now it's not only design, it has to be safe design. So, there are a lot of skilling programs that are, training youngsters and professionals to do safety audits of roads. How to make a road safe without for example, a road already exists. What are the hot spots or black spots in those roads? Identify those roads, make some treatments. So, safe engineering, safe roadway engineering is something that you may have to upskill yourself to, because, traditionally when we design a road, we look for the loads, we look for the soil characteristics, sub-base, base, etc. Whereas now you may have to include safety in that realm. And the last point I would say is one of the skills that it would be very good if you have going forward in the field of urban transport is spatial analytics. Road is not a point feature, right? For example, a road is not a dot, a road is a line. So it's a spatial feature that transcends geographies. So unless you can understand how the road changes across different geographies, what are the deficiencies in different places, where drainage is good, drainage is bad. So to completely understand the spatial part of the transport network, geographical information systems, GIS, is something that you need to upskill yourself to. Try to use some of the open source softwares that are available to train yourself. Or if again, when you're looking at a curriculum to get into, see if you have GIS inbuilt there or not. The other tools are, for example, AI, ML. These are tools that you can use. Obviously, that you have to upskill yourself to. But those are the three main points I would think that moving ahead, the traditional jobs may need to change or tailor yourself. Design of pavements, safe design of roads, surveying, and GIS skills. I'll stop there, Alicia. Yes.
Sure. I'm also sure some of our participants today are interested to start something of their own For them, could you also share examples of successful entrepreneurial ventures in the field of sustainable transportation? And what tips do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs in this field?
Sure. I mean, now it is the age of entrepreneurship. All of the IITs and the colleges, the good colleges across the country are putting a lot of emphasis on entrepreneurship in their curriculum as well, and at a very young age. So at a bachelor's level curriculum also, we are introducing entrepreneurship. So some of the examples, good examples, are famous examples in the urban transport or sustainable transport fields is, your Ola and Rapido. These kind of entrepreneur ventures have come up in India, which are, potentially saving a lot of congestion and emissions. For example, think of, these are called shared transportation. So what we want to do is we want to move away from our own private transportation or using our own private transportation all the time to using these shared transport modes. And now you have, Ola, or I think there is another company that has electric vehicle fleets. So that is even becoming, not only shared, but shared and green. So sharing is one level of becoming green because you are now using lesser resources to transport two people. You are just using one vehicle, whereas being electric is also reducing your tailpipe emissions. So Ola Rapidos is one very good example of homegrown entrepreneurial venture in sustainable transport. Bicycle sharing is another program that has been very successful across many cities, and many entrepreneurs have come up with very innovative bicycle sharing systems that allows you to rent a bicycle from any station, any public station that is available, take it to your home, use it for as long as you want for a minimal charge, and then park it back at a designated spot. In that way, you are, again, using a sustainable mode of transport, and at the same time, your entrepreneurial venture is raising capital so that, it can use it for its daily operations. Another entrepreneurial venture is a lot of work is going on in, integration of the different public transport modes that we have. So integrated ticketing is something which is a green transport initiative that, for example, in Delhi, I mean, if most of you are located in the National Capital Region, you will see that you can use one ticket across, many modes, metro rail as well as metro buses. So you can use a single ticket and you don't have to buy multiple tickets. So many people are coming up with these good initiatives, which are helping the cause of sustainable transport in India and in metropolitan areas, especially. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Arkopal, for telling our participants how important interdisciplinary training is. So now we'll move on to Mr. Prasad Vaidya. Mr. Prasad Vaidya will enlighten us on how India is building better and growth opportunities for youth. So, Mr. Prasad, could you enlighten our participants on the emerging trends in sustainable building practices that young professionals should be aware of?
Hi, thanks, Alicia. Hello, everyone. Glad to take these questions and be able to shed some light on some of my experiences. Emerging trends in sustainable building practices, right? So actually, it's very interesting that we are at a very, very different time in the life of sustainable buildings and how investors and people who have money are approaching them. So, one of the things that we've seen is that decarbonisation, which is building buildings that have low carbon, has drawn a lot of attention these days. We are seeing companies, large asset management companies like BlackRock, investing billions of US dollars in buildings. And why does this matter? So, you've seen that we have large real estate developers all over India, especially in commercial buildings. They build buildings for commercial companies or companies, corporates to rent out and take over. So what we are seeing is that the investment companies are now looking for buildings to invest in that are super efficient or net zero and are low carbon. And this is something that we've never seen before. So it's a very, very interesting time. So you've got now developers who are saying that I have a tenant who is also looking for net zero buildings. I have a potential investor who will buy my building 5 or 10 years down the road, who's also looking for super efficient, low carbon and net zero buildings. And so now we are starting to see a change in the way some of these developers are approaching their buildings themselves. We had an example where Airbus was looking for a building where they could set up their offices that would be 2 to 4 times more efficient than the typical building. So there's something called an energy performance index, which is EPI, and that's the amount of energy the building uses in a year and divided by its area. So if you look at the typical numbers for EPIs of office buildings, that's around 150 kilowatt hours per meter square. And so 150 is sort of the typical number. Airbus was looking for a building that they could rent that would be 60 kilowatt hours per meter square. So that's significantly more efficient. And this is a huge opportunity for those who are professionals who are going to be in the building space, who can do this kind of net zero or super efficient design and construction. And this requires, integrating building science. It requires integrating simulations and knowing how to design and then operate these buildings, very efficiently. So it's the first time, I think, where the performance of the building is requiring engineering and architecture and management to be integrated in a way that we can deliver these buildings. So we've seen sort of, several startups have introduced lightweight construction blocks that use agricultural waste. This results in, low carbon materials that you can use in your buildings. Energy efficient designs and renewables can actually reduce energy consumption by like 50 to 75%. So there is potential to be able to use these materials and design buildings like this. And now, for the first time, I think we are seeing investors and customers who are looking for these kinds of buildings. So that's kind of where I think the job market related to buildings is really going to grow in this direction. And those who are going to take advantage of being the leaders, being the people who know how to do these buildings, will have a career advantage at least in the next 10 to 15 years. So I think this is kind of the demand that I am seeing, and sustainable building practices. I mean, the technical side of sustainable building practices, we know about passive buildings or super efficient cooling systems or integrating renewables and all of that. That's the delivery side of it. But what's more important, I think, is that we are seeing a very different kind of demand happening from the customers and the investors, and that's where I think sustainable buildings will grow. And I think that we've in the past, we've not seen a lot of engineering disciplines get into buildings because that was sort of their last resort to get into. But now with management, data science, and really some cutting edge engineering and innovation that's required in buildings, this can become a really exciting time for engineers to get into buildings as well.
Thanks, Prasad, for telling us like what kind of demand is getting created in the sustainable building sector. So could you also tell our young professionals a little bit about how they can best train in this kind of sustainable building practices to meet the industry's requirement?
Sure, yeah. So, I think that if you are looking to get into a master's program or something, you should certainly look for master's programs that are either related to sustainable architecture, buildings, or sustainable construction. You should look for master's programs, obviously, that might be related to energy efficiency or energy management in buildings, or where renewable energy and photovoltaic and solar applications are taught. But what about the undergraduate education? Are there opportunities available there? And what we see there is that a lot of opportunities are being missed by the colleges who are actually teaching the buildings coursework. And this is the reason I think why I have been working on Solar Decathlon India, which is the world's largest net zero building competition. And this competition actually runs for an entire 9-month long duration. So it can be done extracurricular by students forming a team, or any faculty member or students who are joining with their faculty members can actually incorporate it into their coursework, and we've seen examples of this. So this Solar Decathlon India actually encourages architects, engineers, data science, management students to work together in teams in a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary manner. And they have to work on a real building project with a client, like a developer or a building owner, and really have to make their building design net zero energy, net zero water, low carbon, and cost effective, and then figure out innovative ways of making them. So lots of learning available here. Lots of learning materials also, and experts who mentor the teams. And Solar Decathlon India also gives access to the latest simulation softwares and training for them. So you get to compete on a national platform, and you have access to the career fairs that Solar Decathlon India does. So for undergraduate students who don't see much scope of learning this in their curriculum, Solar Decathlon India, whether it's architecture, engineering, management, data science, is a great way for you to sort of jump into this, and the kind of benefits and learning that you will get will really enable you to either get into a master's program or a better job that works on sustainable buildings. Now, but what if you're not a student? What if you are a early career professional? You just finished your master's and you just finished your bachelor's and you didn't really get this kind of education. What should you do then? Now, the same materials that are available for Solar Decathlon India are also available for a new course that has been launched on Coursera. It's called the Net Zero Buildings Fundamentals course, and I think it gives you all the fundamentals that are required to get into this area. So just learning through that, and if you can actually work on a project and apply those things at the same time, that would be fantastic. So if you are able to do that, that's the way to go. So I would say, three things in summary. One, look for the right kind of master's course that provides this kind of exposure. If you're an undergraduate program, look for Solar Decathlon India, and if you're a professional, look for the Net Zero Buildings Fundamentals course on Coursera. Thanks.
Thanks, Prasad. So the final question, representing aspiring entrepreneurs, what avenues exist for young people who want to enter the sector as entrepreneurs? So can you share insights on successful entrepreneur ventures in sustainable building so as to motivate our audience also?
Sure, yeah. So I think for those who have gone into and occupied new buildings, you probably know that you see the same old stuff all over. There's nothing new cutting edge that you see in a building that you go into. It's all the same concrete, bricks, glass, steel, all the same materials, same thing being put together. But things are changing now, and things are changing for the better. So what's happened is that in the past, there hasn't been much acceptance of innovations in the industry by the contractors and the developers. And so the construction industry has been sort of slow in moving into the innovation space. But what we are starting to see now, and I've seen this in the last 2 or 3 years, where I have been leading this Solar Decathlon India, but we've also been having this Climate Smart Innovation Award, where we are seeing a fair amount of innovators who are coming through and actually have products and services that are working on climate, are working on sustainability. So some of the examples that I can give you that really stand out, are there are a few different startups that are working on new building construction blocks, meaning instead of bricks, using something that is not a concrete block, but something that is used, say, agricultural waste or some other kind of waste product that is brought in and made into a strong and long-lasting block that also has a low carbon impact. You have there are startups who are working on in these areas. We've had startups who are working on sustainable cooling and low energy approaches to cooling. I'm sure the next speaker will also talk about that. But that is an important area in buildings because we really need to be able to understand how to provide cooling to our growing cooling demands as a nation and as the climate changes, and be able to provide it with low carbon and low energy ways. So there are startups who are doing very neat controls. There are those who are doing evaporative cooling and new kinds of cooling systems. This year in Solar Decathlon India, we had in the product division a team from an architecture college of all places from Bombay, who had developed a flexible portable air conditioning system that could be moved around inside the house, so that instead of having to own 2 or 3 air conditioners, you could basically have one air conditioner and move it around in the house. And it's a different way of looking at it. One of my colleagues here, Amanda Thaunhausen, has actually worked on machine learning based controls for fans, ceiling fans and air conditioners, so that they can be combined, so that you get the cooling effect of fans and air conditioners in offices, institutional buildings, and maybe also in homes. And so, working on the data side of it, the electronic side of it, using IoT, different kinds of materials, these are the ways in which I think there is a lot of new innovation that is being done, and lots more that is possible. I mean, remember, we spend 90% of our time in buildings, and we interact with buildings in different ways. So having a good user interface with buildings, having technologies that actually help us use buildings better are very important. And at the same time, they need to be able to provide us environmental benefits and leave a very low environmental footprint. So I think innovations that are going to give us these kinds of benefits are really what customers, meaning people who are buying and renting homes and offices, as well as people who are building buildings like contractors and real estate developers, etc., are looking for. And remember, the main reason why this change is happening is because we finally have investors and customers who are looking for these kinds of real estate.
Thanks, Prasad, on enlightening us regarding many of the new emerging technologies or emerging trends that we see in sustainable building practices, as well as solar decathlon and the many benefits of joining such a program, interacting with more and more professional, getting exposed to such ideas in an early career phase. You also talked about like how cooling is very important. So now we turn to Mr. Ajit Panikar, who will discuss cooling efficiently, the need for a skilled workforce. So, Mr. Ajit, why do you think a skilled workforce is needed for refrigeration and air conditioning industry, particularly in terms of cooling efficiently? And what are the areas, young professional, what are the emerging areas that we need to focus in the cooling industry itself?
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Alisha. And with Mr. Goswami and Mr. Vaidya who've spoken, I have this unique challenge. How do I get all these excited engineers to come towards the cooling industry? And that also brings us, brings me to tell you as to why there's a huge gap in this industry. First is, only 9% Indians can actually afford cooling, for their comfort. So it's technically a luxury even in this country. The closest next big market, China, is about 60%. So majority of the Indians cannot access cooling because we tend to treat it as luxury. Is it really luxury or is it productivity? Would you sit in a restaurant? Would you go to a hospital? In offices, you end up having cooling, which is the driving force. Without that, it doesn't work. So that's one big challenge. So there's a huge gap. This industry is expected to grow 8 times in the next 2 decades. So just multiply and just see how much of people do we need with the skilled workforce. The other industry, this is all I'm talking about, is air conditioning. The next industry that you have is the cold chain. Have you ever thought, how does those potatoes, those agris, the meat, the fish come from the farm onto your dinner table? There is a process which comes around it, and that's the cold chain. Think about it, when the harvest is done, where those tomatoes get stored. How are they collected? How do they get transferred? How do they actually get to the markets? How do they get to the supermarkets? That entire cold chain is just evolving in our country. If that cold chain, once it completely evolved, do you know who's the biggest beneficiary? Two people. You and me get a better produce, but that farmer gets a better price, get a value for the effort that he puts in. So that's another big industry that is evolving at a very fast pace. And the third most important industry is the ventilation industry. What's ventilation? I think COVID was good enough to actually bring ventilation into focus, right? It's the air that we breathe. The air that we breathe in the outside space when you're walking around in the city, and the indoor air space. We never, because we don't smell it, we don't feel it, but it's a slow death killer, and how do, as engineers, we figure out that we always provide clean air? Now, in all these three industries, you will notice one thing which is very important. Energy efficiency is a key factor. They are all consuming energy. So as engineers, or as an industry, we need more engineers who are thinking green. And this is all a necessity. How do we actually create energy efficiency systems? And to achieve that, we need a lot of skilled manpower in an industry which is growing 8 times over the next 2 decades. That's the challenge that you have, Alicia.
Thanks, Vijit. So moving towards like continuing from what you told us. So there is a demand that exists. So could you also enlighten our participants on the opportunities that exist specifically for young professionals in RAC sector and how can they best train for these roles?
Okay, I'll get straight into the workforce. All right, how do you get placed? Now, the largest requirement that you have is primarily for diploma holders, whereas there's a maintenance and repair technicians. There's a huge gap of about 3 lakhs currently existing. In the current demand phase, there is a shortage of about 3 lakhs. Now, unfortunately, in our country, we don't have a process of certifying technician. And 80% of the energy inefficiency lies in these installation and maintenance of these air conditioning equipments. So that 3 lakhs needs to be filled. We have a lot of diploma holders coming in. But you know what the big challenge is? We don't have a proper skilling plan for these things. So there is a huge opportunity for companies or entrepreneurs to get into the space and figure out how can I quickly scale how can I create skilling on a large scale? And that's a huge opportunity. The other opportunity is installation techniques. Now, when a large air conditioning system is getting installed, I don't think only of your residentials, commercial applications, hotels, hospitals, you need skilled workers to put these equipments together. So that's another space there is a huge shortage. Designers, HVAC designers, which are mechanical engineers who come into this industry, there's a huge shortage of them because these are the engineers who build an optimum solution. And that building the right and optimum solution is important from an energy efficiency perspective. Product development, some of the systems that we still use are legacy systems. Do you know this is one industry, okay, the cooling industry, where the refrigeration cycle is 100 years old. It has never been disrupted. It has never changed. It has only improvised. Isn't there an opportunity that something that's lived for 100 years, are there brains to actually disrupt this and bring in energy efficiency? That is where another opportunity is coming in terms of product development. With all this market going in, sales and marketing professionals. This is all technical sales, B2B models. There's a huge opportunity for sales and marketing people, project engineers. When a project is being put up, how do you actually make sure what you designed is actually working there, the right material, the right method, the people are working correctly, the workforce is correct, it's completed on time. That's a skill that is in huge demand within the industry. Energy auditors, we've got so many legacy systems. How do you actually make sure these systems are sustainable? They need to be replaced or they need to be improvised on. There's a huge demand for energy auditors, data analytics and with the domain expertise. Now, very few people understand this, but tech or technology with IT and IoT solutions, a lot of wonders can come into this mechanical field. It's not entered this industry in a very big way, but there are people making headway into it. One of the biggest things that you can do with this is predictive maintenance. Can you use data analytics? Can you use machine learning to understand what's happening in these equipments? Can you prevent a failure? The industry works in a reactive method, which is when it fails, I come and fix it for you. But can we use data analytics and the IoT systems to say that, hey, we know how when you're going to fail, and I would like to prevent a failure. That's energy efficiency. That's a sustainable solution. Can we build a better product that doesn't fail? I mean, haven't we seen that in cars coming? How much of the failures come down? But why can't we do the same thing in the cooling business? And I think these are the spaces and the jobs that is coming in within the industry. How do you get to these jobs? Of course, it's your diplomas, degrees, you have e-learning platforms, your private certification programs, but get to industry platforms, get to industry associations, get to industry events, get to know what's happening within this industry. Or the best thing is get a job within the industry. Figure out what is that segment that you think, because it's a very large canvas that this industry offers. Figure out which is that piece that you connect with best. Once you understand that domain and once you understand that piece, you will find the right space for yourself. That's the better way to work in. But yeah, there are enough courses around. Get to industry platforms. That gives you a better insight into most of these things.
Thanks for letting us know how important industrial information, inside information is also while figuring out what the industry is while working inside. So finally, what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs who are looking to innovate in RAC industry? And could you also guide our youngsters towards emerging business models in the cooling service, such as cooling as a service model and so on?
Okay, great. So entrepreneurship is fantastic. And let me explain why you should think about entrepreneurship. One is, I don't know if you've seen the history of literally every country, and I'm talking a little political here. Everybody, every politician in every country promises only one thing: more and more and more jobs. I keep wondering why the hell there is not a single politician who's figured out how to solve that problem. The truth is, there won't be enough jobs for everybody. So most of us are trying to chase jobs that don't exist. What this country, especially India, needs is job creators. So entrepreneurship is one thing that you should really look at, because there is a dearth of good entrepreneurs, especially in the cooling industry. Now, when you look at entrepreneurship, there are two ways to look at it. Why do I get into entrepreneurship? What's my mission? My mission is to make money. That's fair. That's absolutely a fair argument. The mission is to make money. But after a few years, you will find that mission is not powerful enough to keep the entrepreneurial venture going. So what you need to have is a vision. What's the vision? The vision is, what is my purpose of being in this business? What is the impact that I can create with my enterprise? That's what drives you to create an organization and scale an organization, while at the same time, rightfully, because you're making an impact, you also make money. All right. Now, how do you build that vision? So first thing is research about this industry. See, it's a very wide canvas that I told you. Cooling is just not about AC in my house or AC in my car or AC in my office. There are so many other things that require cooling. Industrial applications, pharmaceutical companies, telecom. Do you think the internet would be applicable without a cooling application? Do you think your mobile phones would work without precision air conditioning? Do you think the data centers would be able to function without cooling applications? Do you think a nuclear reactor would be able to work without a cooling application? Do you think a transit cooling can happen? It's just impossible to think of something without cooling. It is required, it is essential. It's a pretty much nation building activity. So first step, get into a research mode. Understand this whole entire canvas, this entire space. Second step is find the niche within the industry that is underserved, right? Which is growing, which has the potential for growth, or which has the potential to disrupt. Find that niche and see how well do you connect with that niche. Do you think you can make an impact? Is that purpose strong enough for you to connect, to start an entrepreneurial venture? That's the second step. The third step is think different. Can I come up with some eco-friendly, sustainable alternative in comparison to the legacy systems that are already available? Why I'm saying legacy systems is most cooling use refrigerants. Now, these refrigerants has the global warming potential. How can we actually disrupt? How can we make it more sustainable? How can we build alternative solutions? A friend of mine spoke about passive cooling. How can we build hybrid solutions which India needs? That's an opportunity that you can step in. And finally, you have to leverage technology. Use IoT platforms, build IoT platforms, collect data, use data analytics, and then build better products and build predictive models. And these are some of the things that you need to do as an entrepreneur. Also, to address cooling as a service. So this is a conversation that can go on, but I'll give you a little insight. Cooling in your houses is bought by each individual. We are saying it's no more a luxury, it's a necessity, it's all about productivity. Why can't we have cooling as a utility? Like electricity, correct? Do we all buy our own diesel generators? We don't. We actually have a utility service. I consume electricity and I pay for it. So can I use cooling also as a service? Can air conditioning become a utility service? That's something that we can think about. Because if you actually use that, look at the amount of sustainability that we can bring. Look at the amount of technology, look at the amount of the green solutions that you can deploy. You just have a very large system. So smart cities that are coming in India, that's a huge opportunity coming. But it's a highly debatable place. It requires certain disruption. It requires some out of the box economic models to come in. But it's a space that will be here, and probably developing countries like us will look at cooling as a service. And district cooling, which is already an available technology, is a space that you should research and see how it would be applicable in India. So there's a huge opportunity coming for entrepreneurship, but it all depends on how many of you guys have the courage to step in, find a niche, and make an impact.
Thank you, Mr. Ajit. So you made a lot of good points which can not just apply to your own sector, but also to all other sectors regarding entrepreneurship. And I think one of the points that you mentioned initially about like how entrepreneurship is important, that connects to a point I had mentioned before, because India's unemployment is decreasing, but self-employment is actually increasing. But this increase in self-employment is not for quality jobs, but a lot of subsistence activities that are getting served using that. So that is where like we all need to think about more entrepreneurial activities, more explore new ideas and go into entrepreneurship. So thanks for that insightful discussion. So finally, I would also like to ask our panelists one last common question. What is one piece of advice you would give to young professionals who are looking to foray into green sector? So it need not be specifically very technical kind of an advice. It can also be, life lessons. So let us start with Mr. Ajit.
See, listen, when you approach green venture, often the primary thing is, oh, how do I save the world? Right? That's the big approach that you have, which is fair. You need to save the world, and it is one of us who's going to get up and fix these problems. But most of these solutions should be monetizable and sustainable from an economic perspective. So you need to think hard, saying that, okay, from an existing system, how do I actually make sure people are incentivized or motivated to go towards a sustainable solution? How he will remain within that sustainable solution. This is very important. Most of us tend to come up with solutions which we say are much greener, but I can't afford it. What's the point in having a greener solutions which I can't afford it? So the challenge for each of us is to look at greener solutions which can be sustainable from an economic perspective. At times, the goal to achieve a fully sustainable is in steps. I will achieve this first, then I'll go to the next one, then I will take that. So sometimes it's like, taking the market slow steps to get to the larger goal. So please remember, whatever green sustainable solutions that we talk about should be monetizable, should be sustainable economically. That's very important.
Thanks, Mr. Ajit. Mr. Prasad.
Hi. Yes. I think that my one piece of advice is that look, in the in the overall scheme of things, a lot of people, a lot of us, in fact, um, enter into the industry through jobs and continue in the industry in jobs and become very successful through jobs. And very few of us go into entrepreneurship. And out of those who go into entrepreneurship, very few are actually successful entrepreneurs. So entrepreneur is a difficult path. If you are, if you're driven about it, go about it. But otherwise, most of us are in sort of a jobs ladder. And for that, I would say that you should look for getting the right kind of skills, getting the right kind of knowledge, and as Ajit mentioned, make yourself, be aware of what the industry is doing, engage with the people in the industry so that you build your connections. And remember this, over the long term, who you know is more important than what you know. But in the early parts of your career, what you know is definitely more important.
Thanks, Prasad. Dr. Arkopal.
Yes, thank you. So building on what our panelists have already said, I would also say that, especially if you are starting, if you are a young student starting out, don't be shy or don't be afraid to, experiment, to, try thinking outside of the box. Like Prasadji said, don't think of a curriculum as a job. I mean, what if I take this, will I get a stable job? If you study well, you will get a job. Don't worry about, if you have the right skills, you will get a job. So jobs should not, limit yourself from trying to look for these new areas, niche areas of green transport or sustainability. These will pay you very well in the long term. So try to get your skill sets developed when you are young, which will give you a lot of dividends later on. So when you are young, try to, be a little experimentative. Try, failure is not a problem. Don't think that, if I don't do well in a subject, I will not take it. Students often get attracted to subjects that are easy scoring or something like that. So I always say that don't, just take a subject because your senior had got good marks in it or something like that. So do your, go with your heart, see what is happening around. Nowadays kids are very aware. That is one thing that I do feel, that kids are very aware of what is around them, maybe because of social media or news channels or whatever it is, but they're very aware. So turn this awareness into, action, learn more newer things. I think that advice maybe, if you can follow, would put you in good stead in the future.
Yeah, I just want to
Thanks.
add one more thing to what Arkopal said. I used to, when I have taught, I've always told my students that college is the best time to make mistakes because you can't do that once you're in your career. So try out things and make mistakes and fail rapidly and fail often, and not fail in exams, but fail in the ventures that you take up so that you learn out of them. So, be experimenting and try a lot of things out. Don't be afraid.
Thank you all for your final advice. I'm pretty sure our participants will be delighted to listen to that. I would also like to, follow up on Dr. Arkopal's message to not be shy and start asking questions, start asking the right questions. We have over like 100 participants today. So, and a lot of them are young professionals, a lot of you are students. So ask the questions, use our chat box, use our Q&A and ask the questions to our esteemed guests. You won't get this kind of an interaction all the time. So we have a few questions which are already available in the chat. So the first question I take from the chat, I'd like to ask Dr. Arkopal. So you mentioned a few points about designing, road designing, and designing, planning kind of jobs. So one of our participants want to know whether these jobs are available only for civil graduates or open to all in other domains having interest in sustainability, and also what kind of limitation exist based on the graduation or undergraduation subjects you have taken.
Yes, that is a very pertinent question because currently what the new education policy or the National Education Policy 2020 allows many institutes to do is to have interdisciplinary curriculums even at the undergraduate level. So some of these jobs which are very traditionally civil engineering jobs, for example, design, highway design jobs, you will see many planners now getting into, what is called, say, if I can think of the top of my head, something called tactical urbanism, right? So this tactical urbanism plays a role in redesigning a road and making it more safer. Right, so suddenly you have a civil engineer who is designing this road, but a planner or an architect with a tactical urbanism understanding is converting these roads into safer roads with just minor changes in design that are not too expensive to do. So these types of training is available. What IIT, for example, I can tell you what IIT Kharagpur recently has done is to bring about a curriculum change which allows you to now take interdisciplinary dual degrees, for example. So if you are majoring in civil engineering, you can take up additional courses and also get a degree in, say, urban planning or something like that. So many of the courses, many of the institutes are looking at these type of curriculum, which opens up the job sector, which was traditionally for either civil engineering or architecture to have interdisciplinary. For example, I am currently in the School of Infrastructure Design and Management, where we get a mix of students from civil, planning, architecture, mechanical, etc. So these guys or girls have a bachelor's in their parent department, whereas the master's is in our school. So they get an understanding of infrastructure as a whole and also their domain as one niche area. So yes, these jobs are going to be more and more coming up. However, we also need to make sure that these are the industry also recognizes these kind of interdisciplinary areas. They also don't, many times job requirements always say that you have to have a degree in civil engineering, for example. So however, if you have these interdisciplinary skills, you may have to open it up to other branches as well. So that also we try to bring about those changes when companies come on our campus, etc. So all I can say is more and more such jobs will be available for other disciplines as well.
Thanks, Dr. Arkopal. So we also have some questions which are not specifically related to jobs or skilling. So there is to Mr. Prasad, there is a question we have about the certifications or criteria to be certified or classified as green buildings. Any green certifications. So, and also any regulatory compliances that are available in India or abroad. So mostly about green buildings and green certifications that are available. And second question is, how can we mandate the construction of energy efficient buildings in India? So these are the two questions. And if you can also point some carriers that are related to these, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I got the second question, which is mandating construction of energy efficient in buildings. The first question I couldn't hear because there was a disturbance. Maybe it was on my side. Yeah.
Okay. Specify green buildings or any green buildings related certifications exist in India? So that is the question. India or abroad?
Again, I think there was again a disturbance and I'm not sure I got the full question. Alicia, maybe you can just type it out in the chat box. Meanwhile, I take the
Mr. Vaidya, can I read it out for you from the chat?
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
It's
actually
there on the
it's
chat. It's the
do
second
we have any
question.
certifications or criteria to be certified or classified as green building or any green certifications available as such? If any, kindly share those. Any regulatory compliance is available in India or abroad. That's from Sairam.
Great, thanks. So in India, actually there are multiple green building rating systems. These are systems that are used to rate buildings on their greenness. One of the first one that came into India was the LEED rating system, which is a green building rating system that came from the US Green Building Council. And it it rates buildings for different types of buildings, etc. And most of these have the rating systems are customized for whether you are doing a residential building or an office building or a school or something like that. But there's various things that each rating system has, and so LEED is one, LEED, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And then the second one is the Griha rating system by Terry. That's also very popular. And then IGBC has its green building rating system also. That's the Indian Green Business Council. So these are the three rating systems that are popular in India and quite widely used. Each of them also has an exam that somebody can take to call themselves a green building professional. So you take up some coursework and you give them the exam, and then you get a certification as a professional to be able to do this. Now, I think that the LEED certification or LEED accreditation for a professional is not available to students, but it's available to people who are in the industry and professionals. I believe Griha and IGBC do allow you to take the exams and get their accreditation even when you're a student. So that's one aspect of it. In terms of regulatory compliances, etc. In many states in India, there is an incentive available for those who build their buildings to one of these rating systems. So that incentive may be in the form of a small increase in the FSI of the building, maybe like a 3 to 5% increase. Some have other ways where some other taxes are waived, or there is possibility of having a more rapid approval process in through the regulations. So there's few incentives that are available. I wouldn't necessarily call these regulatory compliances, but these are definitely things that are enabling more green buildings to be built and more certified green buildings to be built. But remember, the green buildings market is a very small portion of the overall market that India has for construction and real estate. So there's a huge amount of buildings that still have to be built and constructed to have the right kind of low carbon, net zero kind of quality. So it's a good thing to get one of these certifications under your belt to call yourself a green building professional. But it's really important that you learn the fundamentals right and you understand the process of delivering these buildings to the market. That's really critical. And one of the criteria for that is really your ability to work in a group of professionals or a group of consultants who are multidisciplinary. So if you come from, say, a civil engineering background, how do you work with an architect or a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, or vice versa? How are you able to deliver green buildings? Because most often what happens is that engineers wait for some sort of the design to be developed, and then they say, "Oh, I'll size the structural system for you." Or if you're a mechanical engineer, you'll say, I will size the chiller for you. Electrical people will say, I'll size the transformer, the lighting for you. What's really important is that when you work on a green building, as an engineer, you should be able to step forward and say, I will give you the criteria that will enable an architect to design a building more efficiently. And vice versa, once the architect is incorporating that, you're able to then get the best bang for the buck and a really good efficient building. So this is a key of working in an interdisciplinary way to deliver these integrated designs of super efficient buildings. And when you are able to do that, then green buildings and super efficient buildings really don't cost a whole lot more because you really squeezed and optimized the building and its design. So that's one. The second, I think, question was, how can we mandate the construction of energy efficient buildings in India? I'm afraid this is a sore story in India. In 2007, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency came out with the Energy Conservation Building Code. This is ECBC. And then in 2017, that code was revised. Some states have adopted the Energy Conservation Building Code to be, as their sort of the standard to which the building should be built in their states. However, the uptake of the market in terms of delivering buildings that are meeting this code is very, very minimal. And this is because of very weak compliance and enforcement processes that we have at the local government level. Remember, when a building is built, it is your local municipal corporation or your local urban body, urban local body, who is going to come and say, this is built to the bylaws, this is built to the codes. And in India, we've had very weak enforcement systems, especially for more complex things like energy efficient buildings. And so I think we're not seeing a lot of that. But the flip side of it is that we now have private sector developers and private sector owners, even public buildings, who are now requiring either green building standards or low carbon standards. They're talking about the EPIs that I mentioned about and how low they should be. So you're getting a lot of that happening purely through the market now.
Thanks, Prasad. Is my voice or more, like better now? Am I more audible now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's good to know. I'd also like to ask a question to Mr. Ajit, which is about district cooling. Can you talk a little about the feasibility of district cooling systems in Indian context, and what are some challenges and potential hurdles that might interfere with this integration of such systems in India?
Sorry, Alisha, was that question for me? Because
The
I lost the
question
connection in
is,
between. I
yes,
can't hear you clearly.
yes. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Okay, the question is about district cooling systems in Indian context. So the question is, what are some potential hurdles or challenges that might interfere with the integration of systems in India?
Okay, so this has been experimented. There is a first smart city which is coming with the district cooling. So the first thing is, when you put up a large chiller plant, you need space, right? You're converting now like a utility service. So how do you actually get that space? Urban planning needs to come into this space and say that, hey, listen, we are going to push for district cooling. So a lot of the government agencies need to get into it and understand the importance. So I think a lot of the drive will come from there. Second, capex investments are very high. So how do you get in that investments to actually make it happen? So these are the challenges that you will face when it comes to district cooling, while the benefits in the long term are pretty related, in terms of energy efficiency, in terms of, making cooling accessible to more and more people, the environmental benefits, it's pretty powerful. But yeah, the capex cost is high. You need to get the government into it. Will it be possible in current urbanized places, or should you try to look at only smart cities where everything is being built ground up? Those are the things that is coming, and it's an evolving space. At the face of it, it looks like a lot of hurdles, but there's a scope of opportunity that we shouldn't give up. I personally feel another space that needs to be explored in terms of green building is not trying to cool an entire district. Can you have a district cooling in a more miniaturized form? Can you choose a complex? Can you choose a large building application and make that into a utility kind of a service? But how is that business model going to work? Who are the investors who are going to do it? How do they make sure the investors can do it? So a lot of regulatory framework also needs to come around it. So quite a bit of challenges, but the upside is very huge in terms of sustainability and advantages.
Thanks, Ajit. So another question to you yourself. We generally observe that there is a limited access to training equipment and tools in academic and training institutes like ITIs and diploma or other diploma organizations. And thus the HVAC and art technicians have limited practical knowledge to use this kind of advanced tools that are required to handle these advanced systems that are already in place. So how can training programs be designed to ensure that professionals are proficient in implementing low GWP refrigerants that are mostly flammable or have safety concerns?
Alicia, I was actually listening to one of these industry leaders who was talking about recruiting from India. It's a very large company. He had a very interesting method to say it. He said, I advertised for a job. I got millions of people who applied for it. I send them a Google form to fill. Less than 50% actually fill that form. I called for an interview, and less than 60% of the people showed up for the interview. And whatever the residual people who actually attended the interview, I did not select any of them. He says, this is the nightmare that I'm going through. And in a country that desperately needs jobs, what does it tell you? It just tells you only one thing. The academic and the industry are working in silos. I'm not saying as some of the most big institutes prestigious, but I'm talking about where the majority of the skill force is being developed. They're working in silos, which is where you say the tools that you're being taught on, what the industry requires is completely different. What the industry requires and what is being taught at the academic is rich. And we need to have this working close by, where if you choose an industry or if you're in the mechanical engineering field, can you also take an industry placement during that? Or understand what is this industry all about? And then start studying based on what the industry requires. That's when you become a skilled person who can be immediately placed. Your degree can open doors, but your skill is what lets you sustain and scale your career. That's how it works. And I think that's a space that we need to fix in our country.
Thank you for your answers. So we have another question to Mr. Prasad. For an early career professional, what is the best way to work on building performance simulation projects outside one's job?
Oh, that's a difficult one because building performance simulations, learning them actually takes a fair amount of time, and it's a long process. It's sort of a long learning curve. So unless you're able to attend some training courses, it's really hard to learn the building simulations. Um, you know, at Solar Decathlon India, we have a bunch of webinars that are done. Some of them are on building simulations training. So, and we announce them on our social media platforms on LinkedIn and also Instagram. So you can feel free to look at Solar Decathlon India's training programs, and whenever you see a simulation webinar, feel free to join in it along with the students. That's not a problem. If the question is about I already know simulations and how do I actually now implement them or use them outside of my job, I would say that if you already know the simulations and are and don't have an opportunity to use them, then just take the project that you're working on in your job and do something on the side, and then come back to your colleagues and say, hey, look at this. This is what I did. This is what our project can do. And maybe something will get implemented, but more importantly, you will have a real project to get your hands dirty on. I know I can't suggest anything other than that in terms of actually learning or doing simulations. There was one more question related to simulations. Maybe I can take it with this, Alicia.
Yes, there is another follow-up question. What type of simulations can be conducted in building dynamics?
Oh, okay. So in terms of building performance, not building dynamics, there are building simulations that are done for the thermal performance of the building, which is the building envelope. Then that gets translated into the simulations of the mechanical and the electrical systems, which gives you the energy usage of the building and also how well these systems are able to provide comfort, lighting, etc. So that's sort of the one side of the simulations, which is thermal to energy, and then that incorporates systems in it. The second type of simulations that are typically done are for lighting and daylighting. So this predicts how much lighting is available in your building, and this is done through various simulation softwares. The third one that is done is normally called computational fluid dynamics that predicts the airflow in the buildings and how the cooling or the ventilation will be delivered to various spaces. CFD or computational fluid dynamics is also done for exterior environments, so you can predict how the wind flows through your building patterns. And all of this is sort of, is used in the process of designing these net zero sustainable buildings. So the fourth one is done at the level of an urban scale, where you look at the urban fabric, and you're able to look at the urban heat island effect, how the heat is flowing, what's happening, what happens when you give shading, what happens when you put trees, etc. So I would say that these are largely the types of simulations for building performance that are done.
Thanks. There is another question regarding buildings. I think we have a lot of participants who are from the building sector.
Sure.
So, what are your do you think there are study programs in universities that combine all principles of net zero building in terms of architecture, energy, and mechanical engineering? Whether they exist, or do you think they'll come up in the coming years?
Okay, so I look at the principles of net zero buildings and net zero building performance and on three axes. One is net zero energy, which means your building should be over the year energy neutral. The other one is net zero water, which means your buildings should be largely water sufficient and be water neutral over a 1 year. And the third one is net zero waste, which requires you to look at building construction materials and the operations of the building in terms of waste. So all of these three are not being, they're not there in any of the college programs in universities, definitely not in India, but even most of the colleges across our universities abroad also do not have this. One of the things that we have managed to do in Solar Decathlon India is to put these as the 10 contests of the competition. So if you're a faculty member or a student who is looking to get your hands dirty on this, go ahead and register for Solar Decathlon India as a competition. And the registrations are open now. You will get an exposure to what it means and what kind of expectations there are from net zero buildings and buildings that are resilient also to climate change. And then whether you're a student or a faculty member, you can figure out how you want to incorporate this either in your own curriculum or when you're looking at the curriculum of other colleges where you want to attend, how well they are teaching these things or whether they're covering them in the subjects.
Thanks, Mr. Prasad. I think a lot of universities need to go more and more interdisciplinary. So we have a question to Dr. Arkopal. So how can we ensure that critical geographies, such as rural areas, do not lag behind in opportunities created by new technologies, considering that acceleration of demand for these technologies depends on skilled workforce, and these technologies open up new opportunities also. So how do we reconcile these issues? So that is the question.
Well, that is a tough question. However, with jobs nowadays, you are geography free almost. You can work, if you have the right skill set, you can work from any part of the country or the world. So, urban-rural divide should not come into your way of trying to find the right job. You can, for example, if you have skills in data analytics, for example, you can be in a rural setup. All you need is good internet services. So with internet crossing over to many of our rural areas, you can work good jobs, and this will lead you to not think that, oh, you are in a rural area. And the other mindset change requirement also is that that the quality of life somehow in rural areas is not so great as compared to urban areas. Urban areas quality of life is deteriorating very, very fast. People actually are almost doing the reverse thing now. with all these cities growing, what actually people, why are they growing outwards, is that people want to live more and more in the rural areas because they don't want to get into the congested places and so on. So many people think that me living in rural areas will not give me a good quality of life, and hence let me move to an urban area for better jobs. But now with jobs, what's happening is, and this has been exacerbated in the COVID-19 situation, where you can have a lot of jobs where you can work from your home or wherever you're living in. So in that way, there is some decline in the rural-urban divide. You can still have a good job in the rural areas, being in the rural areas. But I think mostly what we need to get out of our head is that even living in rural areas, we can have a good quality of life, and living in urban areas does not necessarily ensure that your quality of life is good.
Thanks, Dr. Arkopal. So also a general question to all the panelists. There is a popular view that learning mindset of most of our workforce and most of our students is non-existent. Would you agree? And if yes, what can be done fundamentally about building capacity for green jobs in those whose learning mindset itself has to be revitalized? So this is the question. And I would request all, any of the guests, and if possible, all of you to speak about this.
Oh, well, okay, I'll take a first shot at it, and then you guys can add on to it. But we do get a lot of, what we term as teaching learning. So there is being a paradigm shift in the understanding of how learning has to be imparted to students. So I would not agree that it is non-existent or learning is almost gone. It is decreasing. So what you would see, what we see is often students don't come to classrooms, and in the past that would have been attributed to students being, penalized, that, oh, you are not coming to the classroom and your attendance is low, etc. But nowadays it has been shifted. We as professors are looking at ourselves saying that, is it our content that is not good enough, that the student is not coming to class? So how you teach and how the student learns, there has to be that connection that has to be made. It is not the same nowadays as it was in the past, that you have a PowerPoint presentation and you expect that the students would come and listen to your PowerPoint, just to listen to your PowerPoint and come to your class, because they can have access to, sitting here, they can have access to an MIT classroom, for example. So why would they come to my classroom? So how you teach and how they learn. So this teaching learning paradigm shift is happening. That is making the classrooms a little bit more interactive. We are stressing that students no longer need to come to classroom to just learn from your notes or from the textbook. They have already access to all of that. So what new can you provide to the students that will attract them to the classroom? And that's how we are, making that change in the teaching process and making the learning process more engaging. So that's what I would add to that point.
Any other guests? Like, we'll also keep it a little brief so that we can wrap it up.
Sure.
Following this question. Yeah.
I also take this. I'll be brief. I think that there are no bad students, there are only bad teachers. So I think I go with Arkopal on this, that we really have to figure out what we are teaching, and students these days are looking for things that are relevant to their goals, and they are not interested in learning things that are not relevant to their goals. If I want to learn computer science, don't teach me something that is not related to it. So we have to recognize that. So I think it has to be relevant. And secondly, something that Arkopal mentioned, it has to be engaging. So it has to have that quality, and it has to be rewarding. At the end of that process, the student should feel like they got something out of it. And I think that to say that that students are not interested or are bad learners, I think is just a disservice to the students. They are really interested and they will learn outside of the classroom. They will learn for what they want to get. And if you want to make sure that classrooms and training programs and capacity building programs are actually building capacity, then they have to be relevant, they have to be engaging, and they have to be rewarding.
Thanks, Mr. Prasad. Mr. Ajit? I think you are on mute.
I'm sorry. So let me just try to give you an example around this. When I was actually just finishing work and just getting into a professional career, I had a few of my friends who went into these rural places and they said that, listen, Ajit, we are going to migrate. You know, these are guys who came from villages to do engineering and study. They said, we are going to migrate because everything is happening in the city. Why? Because we don't have road. We don't have, till such time the roads don't reach us. Nothing's going to happen. Development is not going to happen. Even if I have to buy something, I have to come to the big city. How is that possible? Medical, I have to get even for a small doctor. Everybody who wanted to find a solution to that problem was looking at from roads. That's how it was doing. Whoever thought that that IT sector would actually come and disrupt it and would make sure that telemedicine and would make sure that high-end shopping is now available to that rural. What is the takeaway from this is exactly what my colleagues have said here. You know, you cannot be that horse with blinkers in today's world. It's a very fast changing dynamic world. So even if you're a civil engineer or a mechanical engineer, look at the other sectors, learn from those other sectors, see, is there a bridge between that sector and yours? See if there is a potential from another sector which can disrupt or which can enhance your productivity. And I think that's what it is. It's all about exposure. It's how much a person exposes himself beyond to his own realms is what widens his horizon. And that's what makes it exciting. And that's very important for us to inculcate in our, it's not just for students, as humans, as consistently people who are interested in continuous learning need to look beyond their realms. And that's very important.
Thank you, Mr. Ajit. So I think it's time for us to wrap up our conversations also. It was a very interesting discussion, and I'm pretty sure all our participants were really engaged in this discussion, were invested in this. So we had discussed about how critical green jobs are, what are the new emerging sectors in each of our key sectors which we discussed, and what kind of jobs are coming up and what kind of skills are coming up. So one thing everyone has to keep in mind is, like Mr. Prasad had said before, that we need to learn at the while we are at the earlier part of the career. That is what our focus should be. Learn more about your sector, learn more about aligned sectors, and have an interdisciplinary perspective. And when you're looking for courses, look for interdisciplinary but related courses which can help you diversify your entire work areas, as well as to gain more insights on related sectors. So as we move forward, it is very imperative for all of us to invest in skilling and reskilling, especially the young professionals, the students who are participating in this particular webinar, and all the other students who do not know about this also. So the journey is rewarding, especially in terms of job satisfaction. We are contributing towards the betterment of not just the climate, but also the society in general. So I would like to thank all our esteemed panelists for their valuable insights. They have given us, they have went deeply into the topics. They have given us a lot of out of sector kind of advice as well, and how we need to focus on interdisciplinary knowledge and how we can venture into entrepreneurship. I also would like to take this moment to thank all of the participants of this webinar, who we had over 100 participants towards the end of our conversation. And so I hope all of you have a very good future, best wishes for your future. So thank you all for joining us today. best wishes for your future and have a great evening. Thank you. And there are some questions that haven't been addressed, so you can write to us regarding that questions as well. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.